Hello and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News channel. We're going to discuss why China is not going to invade Taiwan because crypto news has been pretty light lately. Now, there's a couple of reasons, and one of them actually does start with Ukraine. Now, Xi Jinping is looking at NATO's response to Russia invading Ukraine as to see like will they have a unified response against Taiwan. Joe Biden has already said that the United States will actually actively defend Taiwan if China invades. So that's a big stumbling block for China. He's also looking at Vladimir Putin and the Russian army's ability to actually take over Ukraine as a parallel to China's ability to actually take over Taiwan. And the Ukrainian invasion, which was a special military operation, but now is obviously a full scale war, has kind of been a disaster for Vladimir Putin. So Xi Jinping is not really going to invade Taiwan because an invasion of Taiwan would actually be harder than an invasion of Ukraine because you have to cross the strait. It's not a land invasion. And it would be a huge amphibious assault, which would actually result in a lot of people dying. Also, as we see in the Russian equipment and people training, is not all that great because their tanks keep breaking down for no reason. They run out of fuel, etc., 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 and their troops are not well trained and disciplined, and many of them end up deserting to the enemy or just like leaving and dying in mass, more or less. There was one battalion, artillery battalion, that was so drunk it didn't fire a single round during a battle. So China's probably looking at that and like, you know what? This is probably not a great idea. And just like Russia with Vladimir Putin, if Russia admits that they got defeated in Ukraine and have to pull back, that honestly could be the end of Vladimir Putin's reign in life. Similarly, if China invades Taiwan and they fail to invade Taiwan, a lot of people die and destruction rains down on Chinese cities like Shanghai and Beijing, Xi Jinping will probably lose power. And that's one big difference and one huge advantage that Taiwan has that Ukraine does not. Taiwan has its own cruise missiles with ranges of over 1,000 miles. And if China were to first strike Taiwan in a preemptive strike to invade Taiwan, Taiwan would fire those missiles right back at Chinese cities like Beijing and Shanghai. People are really nationalistic until a cruise missile falls on their head, and then they're not so nationalistic anymore because they see the real consequences of war. And most of China's big cities are actually along that sea border, so they're in the range of pretty much all these Taiwanese missiles. Yes, in a first strike, you could actually eliminate a lot of Taiwan's cruise missiles, but you can't eliminate them all because Taiwan has their own research facility and they actually have their own missile productions plus missiles from the United States. So a war with Taiwan for China would be much, much more costly on Chinese citizens and the Chinese infrastructure itself, because just like as China can annihilate Taiwan's infrastructure, Taiwan can actually hit China's infrastructure and cities as well. And that's an ability that Ukraine generally does not actually have against Russia. The other thing is Ukraine's not a part of NATO, and as such, NATO has not actually sent troops into Ukraine. America has actively said it'll actually send troops into Taiwan if China invades, and that's a big, big difference. Also, Taiwan's defensive capabilities and equipment is much better than Ukraine's. Taiwan actually does have US F-16s, which are much better fighter aircraft than anything Ukraine actually has. They also have more better vehicles and tanks. And I do believe the Taiwanese people would be just as motivated as Ukrainian people to actually defend their homeland against a Chinese invasion. I don't think too many people would be welcoming to a Chinese invasion. The F-16s could probably down any of China's fighter jets besides the J-20. And there's not enough J-20s, I think, to make a difference. And plus, the J-20's stealth capabilities are highly suspect. Their cross-section, especially on the side, is way greater than an American F-22 or an American F-35. And in fact, many American analysts have said like the J-20 is basically copied from the F-35. So it's like a poor man's version of the F-35. I think like one basically ex-Chinese soldier or ex-Chinese airman actually said like the J-20 is not really 5th gen, it's more like 3.8 gen or something like that, meaning that the capabilities are really lacking when compared to other 5th gen fighters. And realistically, I think it'd be pretty close if you put like an upgraded F-16 versus a J-20 in combat. The J-20 does not actually have a fighter cannon or like a fighter gun. It does depend on long range missiles. So if you run out of long range missiles and it's a head on confrontation, a fighter confrontation, they would lose because they have essentially no way of actually fighting when they don't have missiles anymore. I guess they can ram into the other plane, but that's really not a great way to fight. Also, you have to look at the quality of Chinese soldiers versus like, US soldiers that would actually help. China hasn't actually had a major war in 50 years, so they don't actually have any combat veterans. The last war China participated in was war against Vietnam. This is not our Vietnamese war. This is another one that China fought against Vietnam. It was a small scale war. And that was 50 years ago. So all those guys are either retired or dead, basically, because it's been a long time. So in the active military service, there are basically no war veterans in the Chinese army. Unlike the U.S. Army, which has many veterans because the U.S. essentially fights everywhere. So like, Iraq, Afghanistan, deployments right now, U.S. people, they have actually a lot of veterans in their army. So their army is going to be much more experienced and much more trained. I think China's military is also structured a lot more like Russia's than the United States' or Taiwan's, without a very good NCO type of level. American NCOs, non-commissioned officers, are very important to our army, and America does encourage independent action from its NCOs. China's, I think, will function a lot more like the Russian military doctrine, and that's just not quite as good as the Western doctrine as we've seen in the war in Ukraine. Also, Chinese equipment is very suspect. One of the major complaints that Russian soldiers had is they had cheap Chinese tires on a lot of their vehicles, and those Chinese tires often broke down or popped because they're made from cheap material. Now, if Russian military hardware tried to save money by using cheap Chinese military tires, I'm going to give you 3 guesses on what kind of military tires Chinese equipment actually uses. Yeah, they're probably the cheap Chinese ones as well. So they're probably not going to fare all that well. And the thing is, China's Blue Water Navy is not really all that impressive. They have 2 outdated non-nuclear aircraft carriers, whereas the United States has 11 or 12 on a carrier strike fleet. The Chinese Navy is very big, but it's not very advanced. And once the U.S. Navy actually fully deploys in that area, it could easily wipe them out. So China essentially would have to take Taiwan over before the U.S. could actually react. They could go for the nuclear option, but that's like the end of humanity, so we're not really going to consider that. But the thing is, if they don't go for the nuclear option, because that would cause a retaliatory strike pretty much by the United States, they don't really have too much of a chance of taking Taiwan within a week. They would have to basically take the entire country within a week. And Taiwan is actually very hard to amphibiously land on because there's only a couple of places where you can actually board Taiwan's, establish a beachhead. And those places are going to be very, very much fortified. And I do think Taiwan having advanced F-16s and other fighter jets, they can cause the Chinese Air Force a lot of damage, and they can probably hold them off until the U.S. comes along. And the thing is, the U.S. does have a carrier strike force over there, I believe. So the thing is, if China wanted to actually invade Taiwan, they would have to get rid of the carrier strike force, which would directly cause them to declare war on the United States. Because Biden has already said, yes, we will actually defend Taiwan if China attacks. So they can't allow that carrier strike force or any of our strike forces over there to actually actively participate in the battle for Taiwan. So they would actually have to try to take it out first. But if they try to take that strike force out, they declare war against the United States, and that brings our whole armament against China. Now, it'll take a week or 2 to actually deploy over there, most likely. Our naval and air assets, but they'll start streaming over almost immediately. And I don't think China, which will probably face many of the same logistics hurdles as Russia, and even more because they have to cross the strait, can actually take Taiwan within a week. I think if you gave China a couple 2 or 3 months, they could probably take Taiwan, but not within a week. And if you can't take it within a week and the American troops start arriving in Taiwan, I think the tide of battle will a turn, especially as their advanced planes off carriers and advanced strike forces actually move in. So the thing is, like, the probability of China actually winning this war or even tying without going nuclear is actually fairly small. It'll result in a huge loss of life on both sides. Chinese cities may be decimated by Taiwanese cruise missiles, just like Taiwanese cities would be decimated by Chinese cruise missiles, and the cost will be very big. And the thing is, like, if Xi Jinping can't take over Taiwan and U.S. forces arrive, and he doesn't use a nuclear option, then people will actually start to revolt, and he will actually lose power. However, in the long run, in crypto standards, if he loses power, maybe crypto will be allowed in China again. But like, we're not really talking about crypto here. We're talking about a huge loss of life here and probably an overall defeat for the Chinese Communist Party because Russia's military was supposed to be stronger than China's. Taiwan's military is stronger than Ukraine's. They have better equipment and their island is significantly harder to invade than just, going across flat land from Russia to Ukraine. So the chances of success are going to be smaller, and it's going to take China even longer to actually invade Taiwan. And Taiwan has plenty of people. Like, you might think the population of Ukraine, trounces the population of Taiwan, but Taiwan, the island has plenty of people to draw from, at least to hold off China for like a week or two. And I don't think it'd be that easy for China to actually establish a beachhead. And like I said, they have better weapons and more modern equipment, so China would suffer some really, really big losses as well. And guerrilla fighting on the island would be much, much better for Taiwan than guerrilla fighting in Ukraine because the terrain is just much more favorable to guerrilla warfare on the Taiwanese mainland. So all Taiwan really has to do is really hold off China for a week or two until the U.S. forces arrive, and then it's essentially game over for China if they don't take over Taiwan by then. So that's why Taiwan won't actually invade China because their chance of success is very low. And since their chance of success is very, very low, if they lose, it would maybe be the end of the CCP. And the CCP know that, and so does Xi Jinping. So according to their calculus, it is very unlikely they would actually attack Taiwan. But if they do and they lose power, maybe crypto will be allowed. I don't know. Just a thought. I will see you guys later.